protection to the councillors, council officers and the public for comments made during meetings that are subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. In terms of order of items, apologies. I have an apology from Angus Hodgson of Kiwi Rail, Commissioner Anne Tolley from the Tauranga City Council, Her Worship Mayor Failing Tunui from Kawerau District Council, and Mayor Tapsell for an early departure. Are there any further apologies? There being none, I will move, and seconded by His Worship Mayor Luca. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. And coming into us from a long way away is Mike Williams. Are you there, Mike?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you loud and clear. Now, our apologies for the technical issues we had last December in Whakatane, but I understand you're down on the South Island somewhere. The public forum, you're an ex-councillor, you know the rules. Work around 10 minutes, but we're reasonably flexible. But you're going to be speaking to us with regard to State Highway 2, Western Bay of Plenty safety issues. So the floor's yours.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Yes, good afternoon, councillors and other representatives. I'm actually speaking from Karamea, which is at the top end of the South Island on the west coast, a lovely little spot. So, what I'm going to speak to you about is the wire barriers that NZTA are proposing to put along State Highway 2 between Katikati and Omokoroa, and the effect that it's going to have on the residents on those roads. Particularly the ones that do not have roundabouts on. You may have got some of my material from last time and I couldn't hear it, or you couldn't hear me, but there's about 6 million vehicle kilometres a year will be travelled extra due to those wire barriers. And, you know, for a organisation which is trying to cut down on emissions and things like that, I think it's a little bit rich for them to try to increase emissions by placing wire barriers past the intersections. I'm not against the wire barriers per se, but I am against them going past the intersections. And I live on Work Road, or just off Work Road. And for me, if I go to Katikati, I would need to travel an extra 6 to 7 kilometres to get back home. So for me, that means that I will not be looking at going to Katikati very often. I will tend to head towards Omokoroa or Bethlehem, which is a detriment to Katikati. And that could apply to a few other roads that are going to have the wire barrier going past them. That's going to be quite a disadvantage, I guess, to school bus routes, emergency services and then the like. And I know the emergency services, because we've approached them, have said, well, it's not an issue that we want to be discussing. But Katikati is the main supply point for emergency services like ambulance, fire and things like that. So if something happens on Work Road, it could be the difference between life and death to someone who has a heart attack. And speaking to the medical fraternity in Katikati, they've said every minute is vital if someone is having a heart attack. So you add 5 or 6 minutes to the trip, that person could be dead. But I guess that's not a concern to NZTA these days. I believe NZTA are totally obsessed with the Roads to Zero policy, and they have not really taken much account of the interests of the public that are in that area. And just to remind NZTA that the travelling public are actually their clients, not the government, nobody else but the travelling public, because they're the ones that pay the money for the roads to be looked after. And we who live on that section of State Highway 2 are the travelling public. And continuing on from that, they have said that they have consulted with the community. They have had some open days, and I'll grant you that. But if you go and look through the submissions that came through, most of them are totally against the wire barriers, and particularly going past the intersections. But New Zealand Transport Agency are not prepared to acknowledge that because their obsession with the roads to zero policy. And I believe that the regional council has an obligation to be a bit proactive in stating the case for the residents who live along that section of State Highway 2. Now, if we go back about 5 years, State Highway 2 was a terrible piece of road between Katikati and Tauranga. But since then, the road has been improved. All the intersections were made way safer. They had nice pull-off bays and things like that. They've put wire barriers down the sides of the road to stop people going off the side of the road. And the road's been widened and it's way better. And also they reduced the speed limit to 80 kilometres an hour. Now, I think that was sufficient for them to still allow people to turn in and out of their intersections. But in their argument, they state that Wellington is a great example of how wire barriers have prevented accidents. But if the section of highway that they talked about, which goes along the coast, has got no side roads coming off it whatsoever and no public that are needing to go in and out of side roads. So the comparison is totally invalid. And I just noted as I was coming south of Levin, before the state highway or the new motorway starts, they actually have a pull-over bay where people can do pull-over and then cross over and do a U-turn over State Highway 2, or State Highway 1. If it's good enough for them to be able to do it down in the Wellington region, why can't we have the rules apply to us in the Bay of Plenty? And I believe that you as a council have an obligation to state our case quite firmly to the New Zealand Transport Agency, because there are other alternatives to not having wire barriers across. There are things called seagulls. Now, seagull is like you have a concrete barrier if you're turning right into an intersection. Right into an intersection. You have a concrete barrier on your left-hand side, and you pull in and you stop before you cross the traffic. And you only have one line of traffic to cross, and then you go in and you have the same thing as you go out. Now, to me, that makes perfect sense for the people on these roads to have that placed in instead of wire barriers going across there. I would like to know if the regional council has any a policy or sort of recommendations to NZTA about this, and if they have, what are they? I don't know whether you can give me an answer on that at the moment, but if you can, I'd be appreciative. You still there?
Taking your comments. Just keep going, Mike. We'll take your comments on board. Keep going.
Okay. I've spoken to a lot of people about this, and I've just got some information from New Zealand Transport Agency, and I can't get any information out of them unless I put an official information request in. They just will not divulge, which I think is not really particularly good. They also wouldn't give me any contacts on who to deal with, which I found a little bit strange for an organisation that's supposed to be a servant of the public. And I would strongly hope that the regional council, and particularly the Transport Committee, and also I guess our two representative councillors from the Western Bay, would have a close look at what the New Zealand Transport Agency is doing in this area, and bat on our behalf. I don't really know what more I can say about it, but everything I look at points against putting wire barriers past the intersections. And I think we need to be given the opportunity to see whether we're safe enough drivers to go in and out of intersections. And if you have a look at the stats over the last 10 or 12 years, you'll find there has only been one accident coming out of an intersection. And that was the one you probably all know about, where it was this tragic accident of 5 people being killed coming out of the Ongateti cool store. I know the circumstances around that because I know the people who went there and emergency services that went there at the time. And it was just purely driver inattention, following another car and didn't even look. And a truck hit them. So in those 10, 12 years, there has only been one fatality. So the whole premises of putting wire barriers past intersections is really a false idea as far as safety goes. Because adding to that, people like myself and others will probably go down past the work road turn off a little bit and do a U-turn before the bridge, because the barriers will not be going across the bridges because there's not enough room. So we will probably be putting ourselves and maybe other people in danger by doing U-turns rather than travel another 6 or 7 Ks. And I imagine that will probably happen quite a lot. And I've spoken to people who said that's exactly what they'll do. I've actually tried it just out of curiosity, see how dangerous it would be. And from my intersection, I can get good vision and get out quite easily, turn around quite easily. So that could be an alternative for many people. So I believe that could be a greater source of accidents than allowing safe passage out by having these seagulls, which are not expensive to build. And if you're familiar with State Highway 29 and Cambridge Road, that is sort of what a seagull is a bit like, where you can pull in on, if you're turning right, you can pull in and you merge with the traffic coming through on your left-hand side. And I see why we've got plenty of space on most of the intersections for that to occur, and I don't see why we can't do something like that. And other than that, I don't think there's much else that I can say unless anyone's got questions for me.
Thank you, Mike, and we acknowledge your passion on this subject, and I'm pretty sure everyone around the table would be in sympathy with the issues that you've put before us. As a former councillor yourself, you know that in public forums we can't get into a stoush or a debate with you, but we can certainly ask for points of clarification or make general comments. There's a large number of politicians here today because we've just been going through the Regional Land Transport Plan draft. So I will afford any members at the table speaking rights through this meeting. You know, if we have to take a vote, in the unlikely event of having to take a vote, you know who can vote. But are there any general comments? By the way, there's an apology to you today from Councillor Neves. She's had to leave to go to another function, one of your Western Bay reps. But we also have the Honourable Ken Shirley here, the other Western Bay rep. So, colleagues, any comments with regards to Mike's presentation? Worship Mayor Denia.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mike. And I firstly want to acknowledge the email you sent to me and my ward councillors expressing that issue. I hadn't got back to you at that point. I was as correctly expecting you to talk at this meeting and explain more fully to the Regional Transport Committee. I'm actually, without wishing to put my colleague next to me in it, David Spears at NZTA is here too, and I've been speaking with him, but I think it might be appropriate that he explains the NZTA position either now or subsequently in an email or something. But it is being. I've put your view forward and explained your desires and wishes for the changes. But I think at that point, I'll probably best leave it for NZTA to respond directly. But just want to acknowledge your email and say that I have advocated as appropriate both today and actually previously with NZTA.
Thank you, James. Yeah, I hadn't heard from any of you, so I did actually wonder whether you got my emails. But thank you for acknowledging the fact that they are, and I would feel that the Western Bay, being our representative council, should be pretty strong on this one.
Mike, as you know, we have external advisors on this committee, and we have a road safety advisor, and with us today at his first meeting, so I won't put him on the spot, is Inspector Logan Marsh of the District Road Policing Unit. So we won't put you on the spot, Inspector, unless you want to be put on the spot. But the Honourable Ken Shirley's got some comments he'd like to make to you, Mike.
Yes, thank you, Mike. Very good presentation, and I think there's a lot of sympathy for what you're saying around the table, and certainly in the community. One observation I would make: the Road to Zero program, as I understand it, has now been dropped. It was actually dropped by the former incoming Prime Minister last January. So the emphasis there is changing, but your request that you don't carry the wire barriers right through the intersection seems to me to be eminently suitable. So like you, I'd be very pleased to have an update from NZTA, just what their latest thinking is in terms of that. So I think it is a big issue, as you've observed. Everyone I speak to shares that concern. So let's see if we can't get some rationalisation of it.
Thank you very much, Ken. I really appreciate that, because I seem to have hit lots of brick walls with NZTA, and yeah, it'd be great. And I know that you're formerly in the transport industry as a spokesman, and I'm sure the truckies would much prefer not to have to travel X number of Ks just to be able to get to a property.
It's very dangerous for them to do so.
We've got our fake advisor here today listening to you too, Michael, so you've caught everyone today. So David, there may be an action buried in your response. So
that's wonderful, thank you.
We haven't heard it yet. Go for it, David.
Kia ora, Mike. So just acknowledging David Spears here. I'm the Regional Director from Waka Kotahi. So just want to acknowledge your presentation and the data you've provided. So thank you for that. I can confirm that James and I've had extensive conversations around this issue. Look, at the risk of jumping into what is quite a complex debate and second guessing the very many road safety engineers that have developed these programs. One of the primary functions of wire road barriers is to prevent the right turn out of an intersection. Apart from head-on crashes and road runoffs, that is the primary function of a median barrier. So it's there is almost no chance that we would alter that. That said, there are some exceptions. State Highway 1 is a good example on the Karapiro stretch, where there are a couple of right turn off State Highway 1 into a side road, but no right turn out of that side road. That's the highest risk activity you can make. With respect to alternatives, many alternatives have been looked at. We are very conscious of the fact that you can only put so many roundabouts, and therefore you drive people to travel an extra 6 kilometres, and the numbers add up very quickly, as you've demonstrated in your table. There's a trade-off, and the trade-off is the trade-off between the cost of deaths and serious injuries, $1.4 billion a year in this region, versus the cost of that extra travel. Look, we deliver what the government of the day wants, as Ken rightly pointed out. The previous government actually turned off Road to Zero as a program, but what they didn't turn off was road safety. And this is one of our biggest interventions in terms of road safety on the most dangerous state highways in the country. Unfortunately for us, we have 4 of the 10 most dangerous state highways in the country in this region, and the state highway we're talking about is number 3 of those 4. The other number 1 and 2 are State Highway 1. So the interventions are necessary. They will happen. Right turn out is the whole point of putting in a median barrier. As I say, there are some alterations. I know a lot about seagull intersections. It comes up all the time when we talk about median barriers, and There's a reason, for example, at Cambridge Road that we're looking to put some different type of traffic management in, because they're actually incredibly dangerous and they're quite old school technology. Unfortunately, they might have worked back in the 70s when we all drove Morris Marinas at 80 kilometres an hour, but they don't work, and they aren't safe when you've got 50 max trucks travelling down the road trying to turn, and you've got people travelling at 100 kilometres or even 80 kilometres an hour. That said, look, I take your comments. I will go back and reflect those comments to the safety team, and endeavour to come back to you with a response from them.
Can you correspond directly with Mike?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Get details off Amanda or.
you happy with that, Mike?
Yeah, thanks very much. But just in response to what David said, as I said before, if you take out the 5 deaths that were there, and that was over a 12-year period, there have been none others. So I think the argument about safety on turning on State Highway 2 between Katikati and Omokoroa, and that's the only piece that I'm talking about, is a little bit flawed, really. And I think you need to give the people an opportunity to see if it works by putting some other alternatives in there rather than blocking them off and getting all these extra VKTs going on and all the other frustrations and everything else that's going to happen, and people doing U's at the end of wire barriers, because that's what's going to happen. So I think you need to take those into consideration.
David's got all of those, captured it all. Any final comments?
No, I've got no further comments. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you again, Mike, and enjoy the rest of your trip.
I will, and thank you for giving me the time.
It was a pleasure. Travel safely.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, everybody. There are no items that are not on the agenda. There are no changes to the order of business. Has anyone got any declarations of conflict of interest they wish to record pertaining to today's meeting? Being none, we will move on. The last minutes of the meeting on the 15th of December held in Whakatane are there on page 8. And would someone like to confirm those as a reasonably true and accurate record of that meeting? Your Worship, David Moore, would you be happy to? Luca? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? No matters arising from those minutes? All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Presentation, David, floor's yours. Waka Kotahi, New Zealand Transport Agency update.
Just wait for a minute to pop that up on the screen. Ironically, one of the slides is talking about State Highway 2, Katikati 2, Omokoroa, so you might be able to skip that one. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll start just with a few kind of national level updates, and then I'll give a bit of an update on where we're at in terms of the bay itself. Key, most important thing, highly relevant to the conversation we've been having today, is the development of the NLTP and the GPS. At the moment, the government, as part of the 100-day plan, is reviewing the GPS. We are working with Ministry of Transport, at least we are feeding into the Ministry of Transport's process. We don't do the review of the GPS, Ministry of Transport lead that. So at the moment, we are waiting for the next draft. We're anticipating that we should have that late February, early March. In the meantime, as we have today, we just need to keep developing those regional land transport plans. Once we have the GPS, I think Mike made a really good point today, that GPS will determine what the funding categories are that we have available to us and what priority each of those gets. So it may be that some are scaled back quite significantly. In the last GPS, we got rail, for example, and we got coastal shipping added with some funding. They may or may not be there this time, and we might get different criteria. So really it's just a case of hurry up and wait. We will review the State Highway Investment Proposal once we get the GPS, and so that may have some impact on some of the things we were talking about today. But for obviously,
David, do you want questions through your
Yes,
presentation or at the tail end?
happy to take questions as we go. But yeah, as soon as we've got that, we will share that with regional transport committees as a matter of priority. We are aware of the impact of the delayed process on your LTP development as well, and understand the frustration that goes with that. EVs. So from 1st of April, electric vehicles, including plug-ins, which have been in the media a little bit, will be subject to road user charges. So since 2009, they've been exempt from road user charges. There's two different, and this is, I guess, something that needs to be clarified in the public a little better. There are two different levels of road user charges. So if you're in a pure EV, you pay the same road user charges as a diesel, or 76 cents or 79 cents per 1,000 kilometres. If you are in a plug-in hybrid, you will pay 58 cents. Hang on, let me make sure I got that number right. 53 cents. That's based on an average. If you travel 11,000 kilometres per year and you use the average level of fuel versus electric in a plug-in hybrid, which is 2.86 litres per 100 Ks, you would pay exactly the same charge as a full EV. Now, I know there are variations on that. If you've got an old plug-in hybrid, for example, you don't get very many kilometres off your battery. If you've got, there's variations across that theme. We are working with the ministry on some legislative changes that will enable people to make changes to the type of vehicle. Unfortunately, that's one of those law of unintended consequences, I suppose, when you introduce something very, very quickly, that a few people get caught out. But it is the few as opposed to the majority in this case. And yeah, that attempt at saying 53 cents versus 76 cents is to balance out that impact. The process for buying a ruck is exactly the same as anyone who's had a diesel before would have experienced. And you pay ahead, you buy 5,000 kilometres. When you get to the end of that, you buy another 5,000 or 10,000 or whatever it is you can afford.
David, just pause a moment. It's worship Mayor Luca.
The whole idea of moving to electrified transport is to reduce emissions. It has emissions considered as real externalities, but the effects are very clear on what it's doing to the planet. So now we're going to introduce RUC. And there's some simple accounting going on. We're not accounting for that bit. At the moment, 1 to 2% of the passenger fleet is electrified. What do you think the impact of introducing RUC is going to be on the uptake of EVs, which are supposed to confer all this environmental benefit that is not even going to be quantified? Is it going to put the brakes on?
So at the moment, the target was always to introduce road user charges once the uptake got past 2%. So it is now well past 2%. I don't make policy.
No,
I give effect to it.
Asking for your opinion on
it will,
what it's going to do.
Yeah, undoubtedly it will have a slowing effect, and I think that's acknowledged. Will it make a electric car less appealing than a petrol car? I don't know. Time will tell. Are we accounting for those externalities? Yeah, that's a big challenge, and it is, and I 100% agree with you. That is one of the things accounting for those externalities is we don't have a tool that is sophisticated enough to do that.
No.
Well, yes, we do have a tool, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
In a policy context,
okay.
that hasn't been done. It may come later. But at the moment, what we've got is direction from the government that we've met the 2%. In fact, we've passed the 2% threshold, and we are and have been for some time wearing the hole in the funding for managing our roads as a consequence of that subsidy.
I guess the idea was to generate momentum.
Yeah.
The core question is if enough momentum has been generated so that it keeps on.
Yeah, well,
it keeps on being driven, but
and what our traffic guys tell us is that the number of EVs coming into the country is still they're still coming in. They're still coming in really good numbers. So yeah, whether in time there will be a chilling effect remains to be seen.
Just pause, David, for 1 minute. Glenn, then it's Worship Mayor, then Glenn.
Yeah, David, my sort of observation is that most people who drive EVs or support EVs are not as concerned about the relativity between the plug-in, I mean, the pure electric and plug-in hybrid. But the primary consideration is that between economical petrol and diesel vehicles versus. Yeah, so can you comment, I guess what's not clear from all the public discourse, especially if you looked at some really excellent work that's been done on LinkedIn, is whether the government policy is preempting an increase in RUCs for other users, because that's what's being talked about now as the only explanation that Minister Brown is putting in the relatively higher fees for EVs compared to economical petrol vehicles, because it's preempting an increase in RUCs, which will be applied, as he said, to all vehicles.
If I commented on that, it would be totally uneducated comment. That's a decision way above my pay grade, and I'm not privy to that, whether that's underway or not.
Is Worship Mayor Denyer, then Honourable Ken Shirley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a driver of plug-in hybrid myself, I was a little bit disappointed with the fairly blunt way that had been introduced, and there didn't seem to have been much consultation or deep thought into that. So I'm heartened in a sense that with what David says about there's going to be a little bit more thought going on about how plug-in hybrids are charged. I think for me personally, for my council, I guess, that calculation there probably doesn't recognise how I use my car, but that I acknowledge that's just for me, but will apply to other people too. I think the other thing I would mention is that although it was inevitable and necessary that EVs pay their way on the roads, that something a little bit more sophisticated, like what Commissioner Selwood had been proposing around dynamic road pricing, that seems to be a more appropriate way if the technology can be sorted out. But I guess the new government wanted something, a quick fix now, and they went with that. But I do hope that something more sophisticated can be done in the future.
Honourable Ken Shirley.
Thank you, Chair. I think we all appreciate that the National Land Transport Fund sort of no longer does the job, as it were. The demand for the funds is much greater than the supply, and the petrol excise tax is becoming, as we all know, increasingly difficult to administer. And we've just had the Auckland regional fuel tax sort of lifted for obvious reasons. In my view, it should have never been put in place in the first time. It was not a smart policy with all sorts of strange impacts of that. But my understanding is clearly with the improving technologies that we will be moving, or the world is moving, to variable road pricing and trying to base a taxation system on fuel excise is really old stuff. So I think we'll be moving towards that. But on the EVs, it was clear with the introduction of EVs that they wouldn't be contributing to the pavement wear and impact on structures that all vehicles have. And it was an incentive to encourage it, but it was said quite clearly at the time that once you reach 2%, that subsidy would go, and we're well past that 2% now. So I don't think there's any real strong case for grievance. You could argue actually that electric vehicles are actually heavier than other vehicles, than ICE vehicles, and they should pay more RUC. But I'm not actually personally proposing that.
Thank you, Ken. Back to you, David.
Take that suggestion back to the team, Ken. Here we go. All right. It's a bit of a lag. State highway speed management activity. So this is the other thing that probably need to just ensure that everybody's really clear on. So our new minister announced in December that the setting of speed limits rule would be revoked, and is currently working on a new rule. The key things to take away at the moment is that the requirement that was in the old rule to develop speed management plans is now discretionary rather than mandatory, so you don't have to do it. The Minister has taken back the authority to set any deadlines around the steps involved in developing the speed management plan. So you recall in the old rule that was with NZTA. That's now at the Minister's discretion, and has essentially said any previous deadlines that were set out in the previous rule that you may have been working to are revoked. And so how long you take to develop a speed management plan, and even whether you develop one or not, is entirely discretionary. That has some implications for you all, depending on where you are as a road controlling authority in a speed management process. But rather than jump into the specifics now, if you do have questions about that, I'm really happy to talk to you about your individual circumstances. But I guess the key takeaway is it's no longer mandatory, nor are the timeframes mandatory, and the Minister is working with the Ministry of Transport on developing a new rule. And the encouragement is that you hi-hoa until that new rule is in place. Bye. Okay.
David, just pause for a moment. Greg?
David, does that mean the ones that were put in place will be revoked?
No. So if they've already been certified, then they are legal. They are in place. Yep. That could be changed. I mean, you can redo your speed management plan and change stuff, but no, that change does not revoke anything that's already been certified.
It's worship there more.
Have you got an idea of roughly how long it would take to change some of those back? Just, it's not an instant fix, that you're looking at probably a year, 2 years?
No, I don't know. It will depend what the new rule puts in place. So the new rule could hypothetically put a step in place that would allow you to, resume previous speed limits relatively quickly, but I don't know what the content of that new rule is yet. Worst case, you'll have to follow a similar process in terms of public consultation, etc., to go back or to continue them. But I know that the Minister's interest is in making the process faster, making it non-mandatory, and making it more efficient.
Greg, you have supplementary, go for it.
Yeah, is there sort of a better look at, say, instead of 80 Ks, would 90 Ks be better in some sectors, so trucks and cars can travel
That's
harmoniously and share the road quite sensibly?
That's part of the rule process. So the old rule had, for example, for us, set speeds that we could put in place. And so 90 and 70 were problematic for us in many situations because we didn't have the discretion to do that. That's one of the things they're looking at in the new rule is, how much discretion is there around what speed you may or may not impose. Because you're right, in some cases in 100K zones, and we see this at the risk of opening the topic up again, we see this where we put median barriers in place. In fact, when the speed limit's 100, actually it moderates to 90 or 85 because that's the speed the trucks are traveling. And everyone actually reduces congestion because it's a much more efficient speed to travel at, believe it or not. So that's possible.
Just pause, David. Councillor McMillan.
Oh, yeah, I suppose, when I read that letter, right, and, it talked about economical benefits of getting, people getting to work quicker, blah, blah, blah. And, to me, it seems like road safety is secondary, and bearing in mind there's still rural schools that have a 100K limit past them. And my argument is you're not going to get to work very quickly if you're dead or if your child is dead. And I suppose I want to know, I don't really understand, I'm not very experienced in this forum, but in terms of the Bay of Plenty, where are we at with that? Or is it district by district? And it would break my heart to see us going backwards on speed limit, us actually increasing speed limits for the Bay of Plenty. So where are we at in sort of in a nutshell, and is that likely to happen?
So the changes that are being promulgated are a reaction to, and the current government was quite clear in its election, that in the election process, that what it was objecting to was the mandatory nature of the previous rule. You must put the speed in X school, 3 kilometres or 60 kilometres. You must do it within this time frame. What's not changing is that guidance around what appropriate speeds would look like. What is changing is the mandatory nature of that imposition. So as a road control authority, it's entirely up to you whether you choose to go down that road or not. And there will still be, and is still, good guidance around what an appropriate speed may or may not be in a rural school context, for example, versus an urban school context. So 40 and 60, those are still appropriate and safe speeds in that context. What is up to you as a road control authority is to then put that limit in the context of place. So your rural school is different, to a rural school in a different district. You might have significant numbers of heavy vehicles travelling down a road. State Highway 27 is a good example, or you might not. It might be more of a commuter route, and therefore, that environment's different, and what suits your environment might be different. So essentially, this rule is seeking to give you more discretion and to not impose timeframes on you to do that process, but it doesn't stop you doing that at all. And our guidance will stay the same in terms of what does safe and appropriate look like in a general context, and that's the danger is the law of averages, right? The same thing as with the plug-in hybrids. Okay, I have plenty of updates. We'll make this relatively quick because I think most of you will be well aware of these. So first and foremost, the maintenance and operations program, just a bit of a heads up. So we've already done over actually 95 kilometres of what was a 250 kilometre program of maintenance and operations, resealing and renewals in the region. You will see a lot more road cones before summer is finished because we are trying to deliver the full, we've now revised it back to 230 kilometres of, because it's a much more realistic target, of maintenance, renewals, etc. on the State Highway network. Unfortunately, we've backed that off because the Westlink contract that we had between ourselves and Western Bay of Plenty and WSP has ended, and we've had to renegotiate terms with different suppliers. So that's put us back a little bit in terms of that program, but we have those contracts now in place, so we're pretty confident that we can crack through and get that work done before winter arrives. But as I say, there will still be quite significant disruption, putting a lot of effort into communications. So we're using significantly, we get a lot of feedback on our social media platforms, so we're using those quite a lot. We've got obviously the key transport stakeholders that we're communicating directly with, and the public through radio and print media, etc.
David, just pausing it. It's worship near Luke.
I'm just wondering if you're starting to feel an impact from the increase in price of bitumen.
Yes, we are. We're also feeling an impact from the lack of supply. So we've got some real supply challenges around bitumen in New Zealand, and as we ramp up and get more ambitious about what we can deliver, we're actually being constrained in some locations because of that.
So in the last year, how much would the price have gone up? Just to be familiar with it.
Yeah, it's varied. At one point it went up 60%. It's tailed back now, but it's still much, much higher than it was last year.
We get most of our bitumen from where now? Overseas.
It's mostly brought in from overseas. We do have some manufacturing capacity in New Zealand. We have a couple of mobile plants as well. But yeah, we are, to be fair, we are struggling with bitumen supply.
Some of these recent tensions could put a lot more upward pressure.
Oh, no question. If you're a ship travelling through certain parts of the world at the moment, you're going the long way, and the costs get massively driven as a consequence.
So how will you deal with that? Just stop doing work, or cut back in other areas,
Well, we can't really cut back in other areas because supply is supply. So we are having to make compromises. And yes, there's some live examples at the moment where we have got new build activities and maintenance and operations activities, and we're having to make a decision which one we progress with. Because there simply isn't enough bitumen and the pipeline is not big enough to do both concurrently. So we're delaying one in favour of the other. We are working on at a national level what our forward strategy looks like, and a lot of that comes down to the demand pipeline. So let's assume that there is a significant increase in demand for new infrastructure. We will have to factor that in, and we will have to look at that as an issue.
I mean, probably not for this forum, but I'm interested in understanding what drove the decision to shut down our refinery, because this would have been easily foreseen, you would have thought. Anyway, we'll
Yeah,
take
it's
that on.
definitely not a conversation
There's
that's
a
wrong, but it
coffee.
is an interesting conversation.
David, hold on a minute. Greg,
David, does the closing down of a road or a piece of road that you want to remediate and appropriate detour in place, that would give you operational efficiencies to deliver on that road, get a resilience wise,
Yes.
and that would pretty much offset some of the bitumen costs, wouldn't it, if you can speed up delivery of the road?
Yeah, and so actually the slide on the screen at the moment is a good example. So we're taking a bit of a different approach. State Highway 29 is a great example. What we've done is we've said, you know what, it's actually more efficient for us and it's less impactful on traffic and some of our transport partners if we just close a section of road for a period of time and we do that work and then we reopen it. It has a significant efficiency benefit. It has safety benefits as well, because of course your traffic management, if you've not got a live lane passing by, your traffic management can be minimised, your downtime's minimised. You don't have this situation where everybody stops while the sign turns to go and everybody waits and then the sign goes to stop again and we all pile back in again. So yes, we're experimenting with that. It's been very successful for the most part. There have been a few examples where it has worked out well, and the biggest constraint, to be honest, is safe and appropriate detours. And that's one of our challenges. So where we have a safe and appropriate detour, we sit down with the district council and we say the road condition looks like this now. When the detour is finished, we'll put it back to that. So we have to factor that cost in. But even with that cost, it's in many cases, it's a much more efficient way of working. And so, yeah, State Highway 29, watch this space. Those dates there are the dates where we will be doing nighttime closures on State Highway 29 in order to do exactly that, get that work done, get it done efficiently and quickly, and get out of the way.
So David, you communicate that to councils, communities, transport operators, so they can go back to their customers and.
Yeah, and with a reasonably long lead-in time, because we're conscious that what that means for freight, for example, is in some cases if there's a diversion of even 20 minutes, if you've got 5 trips a day, there's an hour. Very, very quickly that impacts on your driver's lifetime, rest times, etc. So yeah, we're really conscious of that. And there are examples where with these closures, what we've done is actually used escorted access. And so we've escorted trucks through. Fonterra is a classic example where there are a few sites there where they simply can't use the bypass that we provide. So we do an escorted access instead.
David, just pause a moment. Councillor Scott.
Yeah, just in relation to State Highway 2 and we've heard today, people have been held up for an hour or so. I had the advantage of being able to go at walking speed between Kapata and Tauranga last week and noticed that the road surface, for several kilometres leading up to the roadworks is deteriorating because of the slow traffic movement, which presumably will then lead to resealing further up. Is that a concern? You know what I'm talking about?
I do. It's programmed generally. We program that in to say, well, we'll do this section and then we will move down to the next section. Slow speed thing doesn't really damage the road surface. Normally what you're seeing probably is the impact of a road surface that needs renewal anyway, and that'll just be staged. So you can watch the space, the road trains will move that way. I know, I hope it makes you feel better. Well, this might make you feel better. So B2B, Bay Fair to Bay Park, or Bay Park to Bay Fair, depending which direction you're travelling. I'm really happy to report that all of the major infrastructure elements of that project are finished. It is being travelled on as it was designed to. There are some final road surfacing. We generally do a road surface, get traffic to travel on it, and then go back and put final surfacing on. There's some directional signage, handrails, etc. But for all intents and purposes, by March 2024, the project will be completely finished. And essentially, in a road user sense, it's done, it's finished. The major infrastructure components are done. So that'll be a relief to everybody that lives in the bay.
How many years does it take? I can just start a project design to the end.
It's 9.
I've been quoting 15, but
Depends whether you, depends how you measure it. I'm going generously. But it has taken a long time and has been significantly delayed.
Hold on, though, Honourable Ken Shirley.
Yeah, thanks, David. Just on that point with that stretch, it's been reported, and I'd like just clarification from you, that it is the most expensive piece of roading on a kilometre basis ever in New Zealand's history. Is that correct?
I don't know. Actually, I can't tell you that. I haven't heard that one. I know it's been very expensive per kilometre, but I couldn't tell you.
I think it's top of the list.
I know it's been extremely expensive, and it suffered from scope creep. It's suffered from some changes. We had to have an underpass, and therefore we had to put more piles in. And there's an awful. What I do know is there's an awful lot of infrastructure under the ground that you don't see, unfortunately. State Highway 29 Tauriko. So the enabling works, we are in the process of working with the preferred tenderer at the moment, with the intent to hand the site to that tenderer this year and start construction at that intersection. The intent being to improve safety at the Cambridge Road intersection particularly, which is a good example of one of those really dangerous right turn intersections. And critically to enable the development within Tauriko West, which is and the Tauriko Business Estate. So that's both a housing and business development priority. The project also has quite a large component of improved access to public transport, walking and cycling. Should take about 3 years and will be carried out in stages. So once we've landed that contract, that'll be a significant step in the right direction for Tauriko.
Glenn?
Is the modelling for that available to the public now, or can it be?
It will be once the contract process is through.
So there is, as you'd imagine, a lot of concern around that, particularly because some of the TNL contractors are saying how adversely it will impact their work, which of course makes everyone else think it will adversely impact their travel.
Yeah, look, it's a challenge. That whole environment, I mean, at the moment, we'll talk about it in a minute, but you've also got some challenges on Cambridge Road with TNL. It's unfortunately the nature of having a lot of infrastructure projects going on in Tauranga is I think nationally the most concurrent projects going on at once. Very close to. State Highway 2 to Tauranga, Waihi to Tauranga. So again, you'll be seeing it now, significantly increased activity. The earthworks season on Takatumu, we're having a fantastic earthworks season. We've done far more than we did already in the entire season, last season on that project, just because the weather's been so good and it was so bad last year. State Highway 2 revocation process is underway and progressing well. Takatumu Northlink Stage 2, which was topical today, we will be lodging designation and resource consent applications in the first half of this year. So we are progressing on that. We don't have construction funding, but we do have funding for designation and resource consent. So we're progressing on that quite well. Waihi to Mokoroa, the safety improvements, as we talked about earlier, 4 out of the 6 roundabouts are complete or near complete. And you'll see the wire rope area following that. And Te Puna to Mokoroa safety improvements, currently, this will be what's causing some of your delays, you'll be seeing reseals, line marking, changes, etc., removing the passing lanes. So there's quite a lot of activity in that corridor, and with the consequent disruption.
Just pause. We should need in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a couple of points there. I mean, firstly, I am pleased to see a lot of work being done there to improve the road surface. It's needed. I was concerned about the timing of that first reseal early last week. Of course, 2-hour journey from Katikati to Tauranga coincided with the first day of school. I just wonder, why was that not done like a week earlier? Obviously, I know it's not going to get done over Christmas, but last week of January might have been better than the first week of February. That's the first one.
Yeah, and fair point. I don't know. We have facing challenges with when can the bitumen arrive, when can the things arrive, and to be honest, at the moment, if you get a window, you grab it. To the extent that we can, we're being sympathetic to peak traffic. We put everybody on hold, for example, over Waitangi weekend. But yeah, we're not always able to delay. But
And my second point was around the passing lane removals. Now, I know our council was briefed on that some time ago. I have a little concern that hasn't really been communicated to the public, and I'm just starting to see a little bit of angst about that, and why weren't they consulted and so on. So I think that people are noticing spots on the road, spray marks and so on, and that's going to take them by surprise, I think.
okay, I'll take that on and pass it on to the comms folk in the team and just make sure that
Thank you.
sorry, I'm just writing that before I lose it. Okay, Stairway to Waihi to Mokoroa. I feel like we've already talked about this a little bit, but just progress report, 3 out of 6 roundabouts, was actually 4 out of 6 are done or nearly done. Sharp Road's in construction at the moment, and that should be done May, June, and the remaining roundabouts will be done later in the year with the completion of the whole project by 2026. That includes all of the medium barriers, etc. And I think, last but not least, well, not quite last but not least, Takitumi North Link. So just an update. That is Cambridge Road, where the Takitumu North Link will tie in and go and bypass, or go under Cambridge Road. At the moment, tying the new bridge in. So what they've done is they built the bridge on the ground, and then they're going to dig out under the bridge and push the Takitumu North Link under it. They've actually drilled down and drilled all the piles and everything in place. Now all they have to do is remove all the soil around it. But they need to link the bridge into Cambridge Road. That's the process that's occurring at the moment. What that means is there's a 3-month closure of that area and a diversion. That diversion is causing some grief, but actually going reasonably well. And there's a lot of comms and what have you going on around that. But it will be quite interesting to watch the process as they dig that out. I think this was supposed to be a video, but
Just pause, David, on the kid shoot.
David, just on the Mokoroa roundabout, it sort of had a somewhat complex history. As I understand it, when stage 2 was dropped, serious concerns about the intensive housing development for Mokoroa, and Whakaora came to the party. I think it may have been 12 million for the roundabout at Mokoroa, which is actually will only be a temporary structure. Now that stage 2, Takitumu North Link is back on the books. Given that, given that the roundabout, the temporary roundabout, will not, the 12 million will not be compatible with the new separation of grade link up with stage 2. Is there not a logic to actually put that 12 million into starting at both ends of stage 2 and actually doing it, fly over Omokoroa? It just seems to be, for perhaps 1-2 years of construction of stage 2, 3 years perhaps, it's $12 million down the tube on something that will just be temporary.
Frank, to answer that question. It is something that B is thinking very seriously about. You'll recall that the Omokoroa roundabout was a situation where Waka Kotahi was in a position where we were unable to support the development of Omokoroa because of the safety issues at the intersection. But ironically, we were also the agency that was refusing funding for the roundabout. And so Western Bay sought funding from other funding sources. We did contribute or have committed to contribute 5 million towards that roundabout, and that roundabout facilitates then the safe development of housing, etc. It was always acknowledged that that would be temporary in nature. How temporary? At the time, it felt like temporary would be quite a long time. That may change, and we don't know yet exactly what. Don't worry about it. Yeah. I tried to play it earlier, and it didn't want to play the game. How temporary is, we'll find out when we get the GPS and if roads of national significance is back on the blocks since that, and Takitimu stage 2 is, we get time to get on with it. The reality is getting on with it still looks like quite a long time. Simply because of the consenting and design processes, the property purchase process, we're nowhere near complete on that. But yeah, you're quite right. We would have to have a jolly good look at it and say, in the context of what that looks like, is this still rational or not?
Keep going, David.
Oh, no, I've got to flick it through. Sorry. I was just going to talk a little bit about so State Highway 2, Wainui to Pōtiki, and the works that are done there. We've done quite a lot of work along there, particularly safety works around having side barriers and W section barriers. We are continuing that work, but at the moment the final 2 sections don't have funding, and again this will be caught up in the sort of safety program and the new GPS and how much funding there is in place. That first section though was the priority, so we prioritised that knowing that potentially there wouldn't be future funding. I'm pretty confident there will be for this because it's a pretty high priority in terms of safety, and it's gone very, very well. And this one is last but not least, Mr. Chair, just a nod to your patch. Rotorua. So
We haven't raised a mention today.
I know, so I thought we'd throw that in just because it is important. So State Highway 30, really significant quantum of work that has gone in there over the last 3 years. Stage 2 of that work is progressing quite well. We had $35 million from Crown Infrastructure Partners for phase 1 of that. That's pretty much done, and we're now moving into stage 2. Stage 3, which includes some of the more, I suppose, contentious intersections and areas near the airport, etc., is still we're still waiting on funding confirmation and design confirmation there, but we are working with Rotorua District Council. Again, it's a bit like the Omokoroa roundabout. What some interim solutions might look like as pressure builds in that environment, especially around the airport and the industrial development. There you go, Mr. Chair, there's a nod to your area.
It is a death trap. That T-bar at the airport is a death trap. Councillor O'Brien, I see nodding there if she still is. But, tourists exiting the airport and hitting that.
Yeah.
And other fatals along there since Christmas.
There's some challenges for us there. As I said to the Rotorua District Council, was it yesterday or the day before, one of the challenges we've got is where development starts to occur on state highway networks and we want to resist having too many access ways onto the state highway so that we can preserve the integrity of the state highway as a state highway. I mean, anyone who's been to Collingwood Street in Hamilton knows, not Collingwood Street, sorry, Greenwood Street, knows exactly what I'm talking about. There's how many thousand car yards each with their own driveway onto the state highway. But it does create tension because you then end up with this situation where you've got development, you've got more heavy vehicles moving in, you've got a lot more, you've got a relatively high speed environment, it's 80 kilometres through there. And the tension arises between future development and what we can afford to do in terms of a state highway. So yeah, we're working on an interim solution for that as well.
Councillor Scott.
Just some of the design of going forward, bearing in mind what's happened already, there seems to be some of the slip lanes turning left into the roads have disappeared, and that seems to be counterproductive to keeping the traffic moving.
Specific, have you got a specific? Yeah. I think, no, I won't comment on that because I don't know the specifics, but yeah, happy to discuss that later.
Yeah.
So it's at the end of the report.
That's the end of the report.
No final questions or comments? Oh, Dan.
Yeah, just one question, thanks. Just thanks for the update. I just noticed there was no comment in there on the Hewlett Road sub-area upgrade, and just conscious that was identified under the TSP as the main priority. So just keen to, I know you've come and met with us, but I was just keen to understand in the context of this where it sits.
Yeah, so it's progressing. We're in the consultation phases at the moment with some sort of preliminary design. The tension for us at the moment is what does the appropriate intervention look like in that area? And there's some obvious tensions with landowners and locals. We know what the optimum looks like there, and that is an overpass fibre kind of arrangement at Hewlett's. But there's a lot of water to go under the bridge, no pun intended, for progressing that.
Thank you. We just want to make sure it stays on the
Oh,
radar.
it's very much on the radar. So literally every day we have a conversation about that project.
David, you happy to move? We received your report.
I move that you receive the report.
Councillor
Yeah.
Julian, all those in favour, please say aye. Against carried. We'll try and get a bit of speed up here now. The chairperson's report's on page 15. I'll take it as read. It includes our letter of support getting in behind the Aportiki district in the Eastern Bay with their road safety issues and the health and safety report there for Mode Shift Education promotion update. So Oliver, did you want to comment on anything or highlight anything in that report? Transport choices package funding update, do you want to say anything about that?
And nothing more to add further to what's written in the chair's report. We just received formal acknowledgements in late December that the transport choices package is no more. So any project that have not made it into phase 2, which is implementation, has had its funding removed. I'm happy to take questions on any other aspects of the chair's report.
No questions, I'll move seeing that report, second his worship Mayor Luca. All those in favour, please say aye. Against carried. Page 24, approval of the draft regional land transport plan 2024 and the statement proposal for public consultation and a raft of recommendations on page 25. And I think there's going to be a few amended recommendations put before you, so who's leading this? Oh, Nick, sorry.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, can I just
Henry.
take a moment to recognise Tapu, who's now part of the transport planning team, and she's been quite involved with this paper, so I just wanted to give her an opportunity to introduce herself before Nikki get this up.
Yeah. Kia ora koutou, ko Tapu Mairanga hau, Tapu for short, ko Ngāti Awa me Ngāti Kairoma Iwi, ko Ngāti Mihinga, me Ngāti Te Patuai ngā hapu. No kirikiri roa ahau, engari e noa ana au ki katikati. So I'm familiar with the challenges of State Highway 2 and sympathise with those who are stuck in the traffic today. So I've been supporting Nikki, transport planner, and have been involved in the communications and engagement plan, and look forward to hearing from you today.
Well, good to have you on board. Nikki, floor's yours.
Thank you.
we're mindful we're just wrapping up a lot of what was resolved this morning via the workshops.
Yeah, we definitely are. I'd just like to run through, I suppose, the recommendations that accompany the paper that Tapu kindly wrote. And I've just got a few slides just really as memory joggers. So firstly, what we're looking for is obviously receiving the report, but also approving the draft regional land transport plan document for public consultation. So at the meeting pre-Christmas, we had an initial draft of the RLTP, and since then, with some feedback from particularly Commissioner Selwood, we've been able to update that version of the RLTP and hopefully reflect a stronger housing and economic prosperity lens. The document as it stands right now is mostly complete from our perspective. We've got a few placeholders left in it for prioritised significant regional transport activities, including obviously the prioritised list from this morning, and some other financial tables. And right at the moment, it's with graphics and they're starting to format it. So we can still make changes to it, no problem at all, but it is actually in progress. So really opening for discussion, any comments that anybody wants to make on the draft as it stands at the moment.
So, Kelly to the chase, do you want to lead us through the recommendations?
Yeah, sure. So
take them one at a time.
Yeah,
Take them
absolutely.
individually, you'll take them all as one. So
Well, we've obviously got receiving the report, but
yes,
perhaps do that at the end, make that the last one. So the first one was approves the draft regional land transport plan 24-2034 document for public consultation in accordance with the requirements of the LTMA 2003. And the second one relating to that was recommendation 5, authorises the manager of transport planning in consultation with the chair of the RTC where appropriate to include the activity prioritisation list as per guidance provided at the workshop held immediately prior to this meeting, and to make any necessary formatting and minor grammatical changes to the draft regional land transport plan and statement of proposal prior to its release to the public.
colleagues, happy with that? Keep going. Oh, sorry, Your Worship.
I just want to make a quick comment on the statement of proposal. Are you going to come to that, or is it?
Yeah, we are. That's another,
Okay,
that's another point. Yeah,
I'll wait on that.
absolutely. Commissioner Selwood has her hand up.
Oh, beg your pardon, Commissioner Selwood.
Yeah, thank you. And I too have some comments to make on the statement of proposal, but also the draft RLTP. I don't know if you want to have that discussion directly now, or because they are interrelated, we could potentially combine the two into one, Chair.
Go for it now.
Thank you. So, as members will be aware, I raised, I guess, some concerns at the last draft about the need to be very clear about the major strategic issues: economic productivity, affordable housing, high carbon emissions, low public transport share, etc. And look, I'm really pleased to see in the draft RLTP, particularly the wording that's on page, I think it's 2021, the discussion around the significance of the issues from an economic and social and affordability perspective. But I don't think that the gravity of the issue and the sense of urgency is adequately expressed in either the executive summary, which to me is probably the key part of the document that will get the most attention, and also in the statement. And I'm a little bit, I guess, is at two levels. One is we have really serious problems in the region on congestion, on emissions, on public transport mode share, and it requires significant investment way beyond what is the current norm. I feel that there needs to be quite a considerable discussion in the document about the size of the funding gap. We don't mention funding in any significant, there's no significant discussion around funding and the significance of the funding gap. To put that in context, in Western Bay, I asked Nick Johansson, our head of infrastructure, to give me a heads up on if you were to take all of the transport system operating framework projects, which are costed around about $8 billion, and add in State Highway 29, which is around $2 billion. That's a total spend of around $10 billion over 10 years. The likely funding that we would get, optimistically, might be $3.5 billion, leaving a $6.5 billion funding gap. And I don't know if you added on the wider region, how much more that would increase. And my sense is that we should be making it very clear in the RLTP and the statement that we have a significant funding problem. We are going to have to, and to quantify what that looks like, just to show the size and extent of the problem, and some discussion around the urgent need for alternative funding and financing methods to help bridge that gap. Because otherwise you get a sense, as I expressed earlier on today, that despite all of these problems, the best we can do, we're already doing, and that it's actually going to make a difference. The reality is that it'll help, but it won't address the concerns that we have, where Tauranga City is the most unaffordable city in New Zealand per household income, has serious congestion now and is likely to get, and in fact, the modelling shows that it will get twice as bad as it is today, even on the current investment program, and that is going to affect emissions and quality of life. So yeah, I'm really looking for that both the statement and the plan itself to be considerably beefed up on those issues. I have some specific recommendations, Chair, which I'm happy to share with the staff that may help in that process. But I did think the wording that's further into the RLTP is actually, particularly on page 21 of the draft, 23 of our agenda papers, there's a discussion there and an illustration that shows the significance of the problems. I really like to see that right up front in the executive summary. That's my comments.
So have you got some alternative recommendations, Commissioner, that you've flagged?
Well, what I would suggest is I'm actually reasonably happy with the recommendations as they stand, subject to the comments that I've made and hopefully others might support being taken into account in the final drafting of the document.
This is beefing it up.
Yeah.
I'm guided by staff here, and I'm also mindful that time is against us, and we're going to put this to bed pretty soon. So, Michael, comments?
Yeah, so I think in the previous workshop we agreed that the wording around, particularly in the front end of the document where most of the reading will get done likely, it needed to explain those problems and the solutions to those problems in a more significant way. So that really stood out in light. So I think we can achieve some of that, Commissioner Selwood, with making sure that executive summary does describe it in that way, and not to disrupt the production of the document in a large form. So I think we've agreed that within that front end, it absolutely needs beefing up and focusing on drawing those things through. I do think there is a space there for us to show what the 10-year cost of the program all added together looks like, and versus the 3-year. I think there's a significant challenge there, and then the ability of that, to be funded as well as delivered in our area. So I certainly think that's something that we can draw attention to in the first part of the document. But I think we've been able to do that in a significant way until we've gone through this step. But the number, now we can start to add that up and look at that profile over those years. I think I would like to ask the committee about the next one around, as Commissioner Selwood has identified, and we did have a bit of a chat about that in the huddle earlier, there's a significant amount of funding needed in order to solve the problems. It is unlikely we'll get all that funding necessarily through the NLTP. So that will leave us with a gap. And without us using the RLTP to do that analysis, I think there is a need for us to at least discuss it in this form around what would you like to communicate through the document in this regard. And to that end, how much delivery can Tauranga and the Western Bay and the region handle? and particularly in reference to David's comments earlier around the amount of concurrent projects within the Tauranga transport system at the moment. So we are heading for a infrastructure storm. If we got it, all our wish list came true, would we be able to deliver it and so on and so forth. So I think there is some manifest risks that we need to talk about with some of this. So now that our prioritisation, strictly as prioritisation is finished, we could possibly start to talk about some of those challenges that prioritisation would leave us with, but in more of a descriptive way necessarily, rather than changing the whole document, I think would be our offering.
But Commissioner, if I hear you correctly, you want to spell it out very loud and very clear to the readers in Wellington, the size of the issue that's confronting us all in this part of the woods.
Exactly. This is a very political document, and I think also our community need to see that we are advocating the significance of the problems as they see it, and that's really the sentiment that I'm wanting to convey.
Honourable Ken Shirley.
Are we talking about the public consultation draft, Chairman? Just so I'm quite clear on that.
It's about beefing up the narrative in that for the readers in Wellington.
For the public consultation draft. Yes. I have a number of issues. My first one is, this is on page 57 of the diligent. In front of the, so I agree with Commissioner Selwood about the executive summary. That's critical for these things, and to me it just seems bland and inadequate. But it's almost tripped up by the meaty which is in front of it. And I'm not sure that it's appropriate. It's fine to have a meaty at a sort of a meeting, but to have it in a document like this, I think is questionable if it doesn't help the communication. And sort of that first sentence after the Te Reo aspect of it, which says, those who are leaving early on a journey travel leisurely, those who leave late and have to overtake the others hurt their feet. With sharp bird's eyes and quick moving feet, land at a distance will soon be gained. What on earth are we saying? I mean, what on earth is all that about? And to me, to start off like that is not really helping communication our essential messages. I just don't think it helps at all. I have no trouble using Te Reo. I think that's very important, but I also notice in a lot of the headings, Te Reo is dominant and comes first, and the English is secondary. And I think, is that what we want to be communicating? These are quite important issues in terms of presentation.
Commissioner Selwood.
I didn't have any further comment, Chair. Is my hand still up?
But being mindful of times against. Linda, do you want to say something? Time is against us, so if we beef up the narrative, turn it up even a bit more, I'm more than happy to be party to those that sign that off. We haven't got time to have another meeting, and I think it's prohibitive to do a round of emails or whatever, but let's be honest, the major focus of the draft RLTP is basically Tauranga and the Western Bay, so I would be happy for Commissioner Selwood and Mayor Denyer and any others in the Western Bay and Tauranga to be privy to helping the staff on this one. Oliver, you got a view on any of this?
So through you, Chair.
I'm mindful times against us.
Yeah, that was going to be the crux of my point. So our current programme requires us to go out to consultation in approximately 2 weeks' time to meet the deadline, which is currently in place, and meeting that deadline is a statutory obligation. We can, of course, propose some additional words, but we would need to do that swiftly, and we would need to gain the support of whichever members are involved in that process quickly.
Happy to support that, Chair.
Honourable Ken Shirley.
I don't feel as if I had a sort of response to the issues that are raised in terms of the appropriateness of having the
formatting of it.
The formatting. But even on the content, if you look at page 62, under inclusive access, it's got Bay of Plenty public transport plan, and it's got opportunities to allocate national land transport funding to Maori roadways. Where on earth did that come from?
We'll always have to take
I
that
think
away
that's one of the
from
divine mysteries, Councillor.
But, you know, we're going to go public to government with this. That's explosive. I mean, what are we saying?
So just to be clear, this is a draft at the moment, so we're still several months away from the final version, which will have further rounds of incorporating feedback from members, but also feedback from the public.
Yeah, I can probably help Councillor Shirley on that one. We, in the Western Bay at least, we've changed our policy so that we now recognise Māori roads for example, our sea extension policy. And I would anticipate that in the same way, it's appropriate that through the National Land Transport Funding could be applied in similar ways. It's just a move away from viewing them as private roads where public money shouldn't be used to viewing them as publicly accessible roads, which they are. And there's been no pushback on that at all.
So I'm not clear, perhaps I need to do some more research, but are we talking about roads on Maori land? Are we talking about public roads on Maori land? Is it?
So my understanding, Māori roads, unless there's a specific judgment on them for the Maori Land Court, are open to the public and be used publicly, and they are functioning exactly like a public road.
I think I need more information on the subject.
We'll get that for you. We'll get that for you. Commissioner Selwood.
Chair, you suggested that we may be able to contribute to that markup. Very happy to do so. In fact, I've noted quite a few comments on the document as I've gone through. I don't think it requires a rewrite. It just requires a series of extra paragraphs here and there. And very happy to assist in that process. And I think a turnaround within 2 weeks is very possible.
Thank you, Commissioner Selwood.
In terms of the narrative that's going to be beefed up, is everyone happy if we leave that to Commissioner Selwood, Mia Denia, and our two reps from Western Bay? Yourself and Councillor Neves, I don't know, and I'm happy to be party to that too, but David?
Yeah, just a suggestion, Mr. Chair, that we could collectively give you the authority to sign off on that final version, subject to input from those members.
In consultation with?
I will take a governance view on this. We could leave the draft, because we drafted an updated resolution in anticipation of this. So we could just leave the final sign off with you, Chair, and through that process, assuming that you would be content that the relevant members have been consulted on the changes.
We need to mention Commissioner Selwood's comments and requests in the body of that recommendation. Because it's in.
So just going through the words now. Just a suggestion. I think you've got those as a matter of record in the minutes. So subject to that, you could make that approval, just by way of expedience.
I'm happy with that, Chair.
You happy with the number 2, Commissioner?
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't see it. Let me have a look. Now I've got it.
Take time to read it.
Yep.
Happy with that, Commissioner?
Yes, I am.
Staff, no issues? All good? Cool.
I think that's fine.
Mia Denia?
Just a quick comment, if we can just sit back on screen. I agree with the new recommendation, but it doesn't actually approve the RLTP. It just says approves additional text. So I think you probably need to, it just, the stuff that's deleted there just needs to carry on to, yeah.
Make that number 3. We'll fix up the numbering later. Any other comments, anybody? Oh, sorry, Lee.
Yeah, I'm sort of revisiting something which I've brought up before. I thought the committee sounded supportive of it, but I just wanted to raise it again, was the incongruity between the headlines targets and the sub-targets. And I'd had a bit of an offline conversation about one of them, but the number 3 was, target 3 was PT mode share, PT and active mode share 20% by 2032. So the year got changed. That was half of what I raised, was to keep it consistent in terms of 2032. The other issue was to keep the percentage consistent. So I'm quite happy for the committee to decide whatever you want to do in terms of a percentage, but you know, at the moment it reads you're trying to get 1 in 5 trips or distance or whatever it is you're measuring by public transport and active transport, but only increase the public transport boardings by 10% per annum, which would mean that, you know, you would have to increase it by 27% per annum to get to close to 10% mode share. So, you know, if you're putting, it's a bit like you're saying you're going to retire a millionaire, but you're going to save $1 out of your pay packet each payday. You know, it's a nice aspiration, but you've got to try and put the two together. And you know, I don't know if the committee wants to look at that, but it just seems that's going to jump out to a lot of people who look at this plan. The 2 other, do you want me to raise the other 2? Or?
You go for it.
Yeah. So the percentage of new dwellings for target 6 enable within 500 metres of primary routes, that was going to be clarified. But the subheading is talking about sustainable and accessible development enabled by public transport and active travel. But the primary routes are not even used consistently within all council categorisations. But if they're the primary routes in Tauranga, for instance, there are a couple of primary routes on the map that's on the council website. And then there are a whole lot of other primary collector roads, I guess. And I'm just trying to understand what that means, because again, people will look at I think this is something people will look at in the plan more than a bunch of other things, and they will go, what are the targets? If the target is to get new dwellings close to public and active transport, I think that needs to be spelled out in the headline. If the target is to actually just get people close to those primary routes, well, then it means a bunch of the development that's going to happen in Tauranga are not going to meet that target. So you need to change the target to try to make it work for Tauranga. And I'm not sure, I haven't gone into it for Rotorua or Whakatane, but I imagine there'll be the same potential issues there. And a third issue was in terms of the page 81, approved organisations raise their local share from rates, revenue, debt, developer contributions and or other financial contributions. I was thinking, because it's such a significant issue, it would be good to put the IFF funding explicitly in there if the committee was to think so, because it's obviously being targeted by central and local government as a primary mechanism for funding transport now.
Well, I think there's a lot in there in terms of that. So, Tim, do you want to talk about the target questions? I think we did raise this before, and then we'll maybe cover off some of these issues in an order.
Thank you, Glenn. The headline target for mode share, are you happy with the headline target as it stands?
I feel as an advisor, I've sort of gave my advice early on, but I think that's sort of up to the committee, so I'm neutral on that.
But it's the sub-targets that are contributing to the headline target that are
Yeah,
unachievable.
I think the committee should either commit to 27% per annum increase in public transport and say we're going to, to be able to explain to the public and say we want half of it on active modes, half of it on public modes. And in order to do that, we have to increase our public transport mode share by 27% per annum, which is what I calculated to be. Now, that would be, to give, for the members of the committee who are not familiar with it, that would be slightly more than happened between 2003 and 2013, when public transport patronage increased sixfold in Tauranga. Now, I wouldn't want to place a bet that you could do it again, but if the committee wants to do it, that's fine. I'm not trying to have a bob each way on it, but I just think they need to be consistent, because otherwise you're going to have to say, right, we're going to do this, and then the sub-target that you're measuring is not going to get you anywhere near the target.
In principle, we would be happy to change the the sub-target for the mode share for PT, but it's really up to the committee to decide if they agree with that.
Just further to that, I think the other thing to recognise is that the mode shift will be correlated to the level of investment and the speed at which projects are delivered to support and facilitate people travelling using alternative modes. And that delivery is not going to be linear. So this is something that we battled with, because we have the overarching headline targets, and then we have the annual targets, in which we report back to our TCs through our progress reports. So that is one of the reasons why there is a disparity, and so the more linear target that we've suggested won't get you to the headline target. But what we're expecting is kind of an exponential curve. The big investments, certainly in transformational PT, isn't anticipated until later this decade. So it's quite hard to straight line that as the first target tries to do. So that's why we've ended up with this strange imbalance. The only thing I would say to the committee is, if we want us to beef up that sub-target, there is the risk that we will struggle to achieve it for the first X number of years of the plan.
Can I make a suggestion just in terms of maybe if that's the case? My problem wasn't even with the per annum part of it, it was more just what it adds up to on a compounding. And as Mayor Luca would say, like, understanding compounding, if you're going to start in 2030, you're not going to get there by 2032 either. So could you just put the total that you want on public transport? Because that sub-target is the public transport component of the public transport and active transport total. I would presume the committee would be thinking public transport would have to at least equal active transport in terms of its uptake. In which case, you can just put whatever the target should be for public transport, and then you cover yourselves whether it all happens at once or slowly phases in over time. The problem I have is just that you're basically saying active transport, at the moment, active transport will have to become 17 point something% of mode share in the whole of the Bay of Plenty by 2032. And I just think that's ludicrous.
From the stunned silence in the room, I think what we're looking at here is we prefer the quantum. Once we get on percentages, we do get into compounding interest rate effectively. So we're happy to roll that. I think that what staff are looking at you for is, are you comfortable with us making an easier way to calculate and to quantify? So the total sum rather than a percentage. I'm hearing that that's probably the direction we want to go. We're not going to give you the number today though, because we have to work it out. But it will change the way it works. The other consideration here is your RPT, Regional Passenger Transport Plan, has this target in it. So that's why it's reflected in this document as well. So it might twist us out of alignment slightly with that, but that's something that we can handle downstream of this. What I'm hearing today is that target needs to be a simpler explanation of what it is, rather than manifesting as a bunch of sub-targets. Might have been a long way to say we just need a number instead of a percentage.
You got puzzled, Oliver?
No, I'm just receiving information from multiple places at the same time.
So that's the direction of the committee. Are we we comfortable that we can adjust that so it's simpler to one, understand, but two, to quantify?
Yep.
Okay, that's that one. Just to roll back to the commentary around the, we have an internal policy around communicating in Te Reo as well as English in our documents. That's why the document gets formatted in the way it does, and we offer that. So we'd start off with that, and that's certainly the way that our regional policy statements and other documents are created within the regional council. So we're effectively following our internal guidance on this.
Sorry, that's the staff internal guidance, is it? And not
Regional council and direction from regional council production of documents.
Right.
I am a little unsure about what the issues that got raised that we haven't answered the question. So I think we're going
We'll
to
go back to the recommendations up handed. Sign them off again, 1 through to 8, I think we're on now.
So we just roll on that, so we can just see just go on.
I flagged the last suggestion that the hearings and deliberations for the 2024 regional land transport be undertaken by the full committee. I think there's sufficient interest around the table that the voting members of the regional transport committee would constitute the deliberations and hearing committee. So, we'll be happy with that. Yep, excellent. You know who they all are.
Okay, so series of approvals, and they might feel slightly out of order, but we'll go through them in the number order. The first one receives the report. Number 2 approves the draft regional land transport plan. I think from the discussion, it's subject to those changes that we discussed today, which recommendation 3 helps to pull in. And it allows the chair, the staff, to approve those changes. So we do get the ability to meet that 2-week deadline, that we get the feedback in. And then on to 4, authorises the special consultative procedure, which we have to use in this space. That's fairly part of the course. Approves the statement of proposal, including consultation questions. And I don't think we've had that.
You wanted to make some comments about that?
Comment on that, yeah.
Yes, so I think with that one, my comment was on page 39 of the agenda. There's a map which shows the highlights of the RLTP works or proposals, and given where the prioritisations have likely landed or look like they've landed, I just want to make sure that instead of just having the top 10 projects on the map, it should be just everyone from around the region can see something that they can identify with and agree with. And it has been split up to some extent. I just want to make sure that in the final version that is subject to the prioritisation revisions that we've made, that it's an inclusive map that everyone can find something they understand and helps them in their daily life.
Thank you. Formatting.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.
Formatting. Yeah.
Yes, it definitely will reflect the prioritised activities that we've discussed this morning, and you can be assured that there will be representation from across the region.
Okay, thank you, that was it.
Michael.
Moving on to number 6, the meat of this recommendation is to make sure that we are including that activity prioritisation from the workshop immediately before this meeting. So we brought that new list in, and then pulling that through into the documents in question, and then I think the chair's explained the recommendation 8. And if our house is in order, that should allow us to proceed with the next step, make the changes, make sure that the chair and supported by members of this committee are comfortable with that. And then we can move through into the next phase of this delivery.
Commissioner Selwood, specifically to you, the beefing up of the narrative, are you happy with how it's worded or referenced here?
Well, I think given that the minutes will note the conversation, I think that's adequate.
You happy to move the recommendations?
I would be happy to move them.
Worship Mayor Denier, been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? There being none, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Before you do, can you add a ninth one there, thanking staff, in particular the reference group or the technical advisory group, noted in the minutes. Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. We're right on the home straight now. Verbal update opportunity from committee members and advisors. Mayor Luke, anything hot in your spot at the moment? Or?
Not really.
Not really. Greg, in the transport field, anything you want to put on the table, bring to our attention of interest?
I guess there's a little bit of information we did at Transporting New Zealand the other day and sort of put it to the media. If I can just find it's a quick note here. Let's go straight to the crux of it. Basically, it's around that the simple facts are that heavier and longer trucks mean fewer trucks are needed to move the same amount of freight. This means heavier and longer trucks reduce emissions, reduce congestion, reduce the safety risk for other road users.
Mayor Moore, anything you'd like?
No, update some, thank you for that support letter for, trying to get some more police in our district, this Western
Did it work?
There's a program, make sure I don't watch it on, one of the programs on Sunday, but look, Mr. Mitchell might be a bit upset with me, so, it's not a dig at police, it's a dig at resourcing the police, so, thank you for all that support for,
That's what it's all about. Stacey?
Just a quick one. Thank you all for letting us continue to attend. A piece of work that I'm undertaking, working with our team at the moment. So I sit on the AA Research Foundation, which is a not-for-profit research organisation that produces road safety focused research for New Zealand. And a really interesting piece of work that we're undertaking at the moment that'll be finished by June-ish this year is low-cost safety treatments for rural intersections. So it'll be a really interesting piece of work we look forward to sharing with road controlling authorities, with planners, engineers. So I'm hoping to table that.
Dean, like report?
I'm just conscious of time. I just really wanted to emphasise, obviously, that we remain committed to sort of delivering resilient infrastructure for New Zealand, and we were pleased that on the 13th of December last year, we received an interim decision on the Port berth extension, which is essentially a green light for the stage 1 of the wharf extension at Salford Point, subject to a number of court directions that have to be complied with over the next 6 months. So we're focused on that, and part of our commitment to making sure that New Zealand has resilient infrastructure through its transport network and ports.
Good to have you with us here today. So, no, good to have you with us here today.
Thank you.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but if there's anything that you'd like to, sorry? You've got a whole presentation.
No, not a whole presentation, it's a quick presentation. I apologise.
My apologies.
Yeah, I've been in my role for a couple of months, so go easy on me. But thank you for the invitation. It's just a bit of an update over the last 12 months. You'll see over the last 5 years, we've had 4 years, we've had some movement. Last year was looking a lot better until the last couple of months, which we had a spike again. This year has started in a hurry, sadly. So far with the first month going through, we've lost 5 lives. There's a couple of variations, Dave, maybe with your numbers, just with stuff still with the coroner. In our productivity across the district, I'm aware of previous meetings, there's been discussion about it. So a sort of snapshot. At the moment, total traffic notices that we've given out have raised and lifted significantly over the last 12 months, with over 70,000 being delivered over in the district, which is pleasing in terms of delivery, but really not good in terms that we have to deliver them, sadly. Would be a good day if we were delivering none, but this breakdown into the areas as such, I won't go too far into it, but you'll see there's significant improvement across all the 4 areas, being Western Balcony, Eastern Balcony, and Taupo and Rotorua. This next slide is in relation to our alcohol tests, which have been carried out across the balcony in the last 12 months. You'll see our staff have delivered over 287,000 tests across the district. You'll see that's rising as well, in a good manner across the 12 months. The disappointing slide is the next one, which is the evidential alcohol tests. That said, it looks to be coming down somewhat. It's obviously attributed to the number that we're providing, which is a lot more. Sadly, we're still seeing the high results up into the 1700s and already over 1600 this year. And the limit being 250, that's not ideal. Our priorities this year, they're still the same old stuff, because the message doesn't seem to be getting out that well in some locations across the district, to be honest. But our emphasis will be on those rural and state highway locations, again through the impairment, which we've just seen the result of, with the large increase in the testing. We're still seeing distraction in around the likes of the intersections, especially in the urban areas, which our teams are working on as well. And again, targeting those speeds to try and enforce that the limit is the limit, and that everyone, if they're over that limit, will expect to be stopped and ticketed. So we're still pushing that. And lastly, in the education space, we're working with some groups across the district, one of which is you may have already heard about the Right Track program, which has just been introduced into the balcony, and we'll be starting work in the next couple of months, which works on focusing on right through from teens to recidivist offenders that are just keep turning up in the system, providing them with some education and some tools, rather than just continuing to provide them with sentences from the court. So that's exciting for us. We're trying to do that we're trying to work a lot more in that educational space as we can as well across the district, because obviously that's provides a better future than just enforcing it as such. But that's me. Open to any questions.
Any questions to the inspector? Yes. Councillor Julian.
I notice that you haven't got the statistics for the Eastern Bay of Plenty. It's not speed, it's no seat belts and alcohol, but seat belts particularly is a big cause. So speed and seat belts for the Eastern Bay of Plenty.
Yeah, I can get further details on it. I can break them down and give them to you. But yeah, it's as I said, the point of our contacts are around those restraints, the speed. They're the four, the RIDs, as we've spoken about for years. Yes, it's something that's an issue, but I can get you those stats if you need them.
Thanks, Inspector. Your Worship, anything else from the Western Bay? They've not given a decent enough day in court today. Councillor Julian, anything covered out you'd like to add? Glenn? Thank you, everyone. That's the end of the meeting. I'll thank you for your attendance, and particularly thank staff, all of you. Been amazing, you know, and you too, Amanda. So we'll meet again, but travel safely. You've heard what the inspector has said, and have a good weekend, everyone. Thanks for the meeting.